So digital dividend spectrum is the spectrum that gets made free when broadcasters move from analog TV broadcasting to digital broadcasting. And if you imagine today you've got sort of 6 or 7 analog television channels being broadcasted, when they digitize that, it takes up about the same amount of space as one channel, and so you get an amount of free spectrum, and that's the dividend that you have, that becomes available for either use by broadcasters or potentially use by other services and around the world, quite often mobile. From the mobile industry perspective, we'd suggest there's a win-win going on here as opposed to a war. So, as I said, the broadcasters get the spectrum that they've already got, and in terms of capacity, they'd be able to deliver many times more television channels. They'll be able to deliver high definition and many of the sort of enhanced broadcasting services that they want to be able to deliver. We're looking at 25% of that spectrum, and in that we'll be able to deliver broadband services for consumers. And the reason this spectrum is so valuable for us is it allows us to deliver affordable broadband right out into the rural areas, quite often beyond ADSL coverage, beyond cable coverage, and we're likely to be, we believe, one of the few sort of infrastructures that is going to be able to provide the sort of depth and breadth of coverage that most countries are going to require. So there is a bit of a battle, but around the world, most governments now pretty much recognise that a mobile using this sort of 25% of the spectrum is going to be good for their economy and good for society. Well, spectrum is a very long process. It's a government process, and so an identification was made at something called WRC, which is back in 2007, and Asia identified 2 options in terms of bands. The bulk of Asia identified the 700 megahertz band, and some of Asia identified the 800 megahertz band. Since then, Asia's been trying to work out how they will use the 700 megahertz band. A recommendation was made, I think maybe 3 months or so ago, in the AWF to allocate the 700 band in the band plan that we modelled in this report. So there is quite strong alignment behind it, and it's interesting that this is a very specific, it's specifically regional in Asia's decision. Australia and New Zealand, first movers in this band, and they've said that they're going to go and they're going to implement this band, and they're going to implement it with what we would term a sort of 2x45 band plan, which is the way that Asia has decided and configured that. We're expecting other markets to follow and make decisions to allocate the 700 band, which we're expecting most markets will end up following. They'll follow the 2x45, and they'll look at an implementation plan as they plan analog switch off of TV, which will be starting now. I think markets like Hong Kong, I think 2012 approximately, we believe they'll have switched off analog TV, and we'll roll through to sort of 2015, 2016.